In this video, you're going to learn all about the Nashville Number System, and by the end of it, you're going to know exactly what it is and how to apply it to any song that you want in your worship ministry. Coming up. Hey everyone, Spencer here from leadingworshipwell.com, your daily dose of practical worship leading tips. If you want to find those tips, head over to Instagram or Facebook at Leading Worship Well, where I'm posting new worship leading tips just like the one I'm about to share every single day. So head over to Instagram or Facebook. I'd love to connect with you there, but you're here on YouTube right now, so go ahead, hit the subscribe button down below, and let's get into it, because today we're talking about the Nashville Number System, and I believe that the Nashville Number System is really one of the keys. If you don't know it yet, it's the key to unlocking that next step in the musical part of leading worship. There's a bunch of different parts of leading worship. There's the spiritual side, there's the leadership side of leading a team in your church, but then there's also the musical side. And this is like, if you can master the Nashville Number System, and it's not as hard as it sounds, I'm going to explain it very simply here in just a moment. If you can master the Nashville Number System, it opens up so many doors of understanding. So I believe that this is the key to improving the musical side of your worship leading. In fact, I believe that it's so important that this is actually going to be the first video in a series that I'm doing on the Nashville Number System, where in this video we're going to find out what it is, because we have to know what it is and how to understand it before we know how to use it. In next week's video, we're going to be talking about some specific things, some benefits of why you should know it, but also how to use it. And then the last video of this series is going to be about the one most practical and probably the one that you'll use most. We're going to learn how to do that. So that's where this series is headed, but let's get into it, because first of all, the lighting's really bad today. It's raining outside, super dark outside, to use some alternative lighting. As you can tell from the glare on my head, I've got the overhead lights on, so that doesn't matter. We're going to be looking at my screen a lot today, because I've got to explain this Nashville Number System to you. And I'm really going to put it in terms of what it means for a worship leader. So if you don't know what the Nashville Number System is, let's just define it. This is straight off of Wikipedia, just straight off of there, and it's a little bit hard to understand, so I'm going to break it down. But this is, in essence, what the Nashville Number System is. The Nashville Number System is a method of transcribing music by denoting the scale degree on which a chord is built. Now let's break that down, because there's some musical words in there that we need to define so that we understand what it is. So let's take a look at it again. All right, it's a method of transcribing music. So transcribing music just means writing it out on a piece of paper, writing it in a form that other people can read, as opposed to just it all being up here and, like, you know, those people who only play by ear, and if you ask them what chord they're playing, they have no idea. Transcribing music is being able to write down exactly what you're playing. So for most people, that would take the form of a chord chart. It could also be sheet music, but we're going to think of it in terms of a chord chart today. So what you might be used to whenever you see transcribed music is like the lyrics, right? And then the chords above it. So it might be like, okay, here's the first line of the lyrics, and there's a G chord here and a D chord here, and you go throughout the piece, and that's a chord chart. That's one way of transcribing music. So the Nashville Number System is similar to that, but we're going to learn how it differs here in a minute. But that is the act of transcribing music. So what makes it different than a standard chord chart that you'd see with like the chord names on it? Well, instead of using the chord names like G, C, D, E minor, we're going to use the scale degree on which a chord is built. So we need to dive into an example for me to show you what that means. So let's get into it. This is the explanation of the Nashville Number System, and it's best to explain it through an example. So let's say that we're in the key of G. Remember, we're going to be using the scale degree. So what is a scale degree? Well, every key has a scale. Pretty simple. This is just the major scale, the notes of a major G scale. or a G major scale, I should say. So we start with a G, and then we go up to an A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, and then it repeats back to G. So that is the scale. What is a scale degree? Well, simply put, all you do is give each of these notes a number, and it's just numerical in order. There's no trickery with it, right? It's just G gets 1 because that's the first note, so that's the first scale degree, and then A gets a 2 because that's the second scale degree, and so on until you get to the end. And I just have G down here because this technically repeats into infinity. So we're working with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 scale degrees. You won't use 8 because we'll just go back to 1 because that's the same thing. So what is the Nashville number system in regards to that? Well, each of these notes corresponds to a chord. So if you're familiar with the key of G and what chords are in the key of G, you can probably think them through in your head, right? We've got a G chord, and we're usually playing a C chord and a D chord and an E minor chord. So let me draw this out and I'll show you what that means as far as scale degrees go. So this is where those chords come from. The chords, if you've never known this before, literally come from these scale degrees. And what we're saying whenever we use the Nashville number system is like it said, we're putting the scale degree that the chord is built on. That's what we're writing. So instead of a G, we'd write a 1. So here's the first chord. Let's say the first chord is a G, right? So if you want to play a G chord, the way you build a chord, and this is music theory like 101, but some of you probably don't know that, and that's okay. If you want to build a chord, you start on a scale degree, so we're in the key of G, and the notes in a G chord would be a G, a B, because we always skip a note in between, and a D. So that is a G chord right there. And if you were to play a G chord and figure out all the notes that you're playing on a guitar, those are the notes that you would find. Same thing with a C chord. We play a C chord in the key of G, right? Why do you do that? Well, a C chord has a C note, an E note. Remember, we're always skipping one note, and then a G note. All right, so that's where the chords come from. Now, along with this, we also have to consider whether a chord based on the scale degree is a major or a minor. And there's a specific way that you can figure that out. You just look at what I just did and showed you all the notes that are in a chord, but you can also just memorize this formula, and this is just as easy. So this is true in all keys, not just in the key of G, but the 1 scale degree will always make a major chord, the second will always make a minor, third will make a minor, fourth major, fifth major, sixth minor, seventh diminished. We don't really use those chords too much, and then it just repeats again. So here's our chords in the key of G, right? You have a G chord, that's a G major. We play that all the time. You have a C chord, which is a C major. We don't usually say C major, but it is a C major chord. We usually just say C. Same thing with D. You'll say I'm playing a D chord. It's actually a D major. Now here's where the minor comes in, and that is an E minor. We know that we don't just play an E in the key of G, we play an E minor. So that's where all of these chords come from. So now, what's the Nashville number system? How do you use it? That's kind of the basis and all of the knowledge that you need to actually understand it. And once again, I want to show you an example of this, and it'll make sense here now that you know what a scale degree is and how chords are built. And you don't really have to understand all of that super in depth, but you do need to know the scales and the scale degrees to figure this out. So let's go back to an example. We'll use the most popular song in the world, How Great Is Our God. And here's just like a standard, this is what you'd see on a chord chart. This is probably what most of you are working with. So you know the chords to How Great Is Our God. This is just the verse. There's 3 chords in the chorus. You'd add a D there in at the end. But let's just work super simple, just these 3 chords. All right, so this is what you'd normally see. You'd see a G chord right here, a G chord, an E minor chord, and a C chord. So that's just the normal way of transcribing music. But if we want to do it with the Nashville number system, here's what we need to do. We need to pull up what we had before. So this is just what was on the last slide, remember? Instead of just doing the note names, now we want to talk about the scale degrees. So let's work through this together, and then I'll give you another example that you can pause the video and do on your own. But what we're going to do is replace these note names with the scale degree. Simple as that. So we've got a G here, so we need to go down to the key of G, find the scale. Where is a G on here? And let me just cross this out because that's just repeating it. All right, so we aren't using that. So where's the G? The G is right here. What scale degree is it? Because that's what the Nashville number system is. It is the 1 scale degree, or the first scale degree, I should say. So if you were to write this with the Nashville number system, you would simply write, instead of a G, you'd write a 1. And now you are using numbers instead of chord names. And that'll be important and a benefit as we continue on, but we'll get into that a little bit later. Let's move on to the next chord. So we have the 1 chord to start out because G is the first degree of the scale. Now, an E minor. Where is an E minor? Let's look at our scale again. We have a G, A, B, C, D, E. Now it doesn't say E minor, but remember, each of these scale degrees has these major or minors associated along with them. So we do have the E, which is the 6, and we find out that the 6 is always a minor chord. So that makes this an E minor. So the E minor is a 6 chord. And just one more chord to figure out, which is the C chord. And if we look at our scale again, C is the 4th degree of the scale. And so we just write a 4 beside it. So simply put, the chords to this song, the chord progression is a 1, 6, 4 chord progression. A 1, 6, 4 chord progression. And now let's just do the rest of this verse, because once you figure these out once and you figure out that, well, the G is the 1 chord in the key of G, E minor is the 6th, C is the 4th, all you have to do is go through the rest of the song and write down the numbers beside the letters. So for example, here's a G again. We already know that's the 1 chord. Here's an E minor. We already know that's the 6th chord. And then here's the C, and we already know that's the 4 chord. So it just repeats over and over again. So simply put, that's the Nashville number system. And in the next video, we're going to talk about why that's so important. But now I want to give you a chance to put this to the test and see whether you understand. And then I'm going to give you a little bit of homework before next week after this. So let's look at one more example, and let's use the song What a Beautiful Name because it's in a different key. So once again, here's the chord chart. You start on a D, then go to a G, B minor, A, B minor, D, G, B minor, A. Now, the first thing that you have to do is you got to know the key that we're in. So what key is this in? Well, we just know from experience, and there's other ways of figuring this out, but let's just keep it quick and simple today. We know that we're in the key of D because of the chords that we're using. You're always playing a D, G, B minor, A. If you're playing those chords, pretty much 95% of the time, you're in the key of D. So we need to pull up the D scale, and this is exactly what we looked at for the key of G, except now we're in the key of D. So here's just the major D scale, again, the D major scale, and the scale degrees. Now, what I want you to do is, I'm going to flip back to the chord chart here in a second, but when I do, I want you to just pause the video, and I want you to try to figure out what numbers are associated with each chord. Just like we did for the last song, the process hasn't changed. You're going to look at the chord and then find the corresponding scale degree and then figure out what number is associated with that chord. So I'm flipping back. Go ahead, pause the video right here on the screen, and we'll see how you do. Try to figure out all the chords. Go ahead. All right, I'm going to assume that you have paused the video and figured it out. Let's check and see how you did, and I'll walk you through this again. So we've got a D chord up here, the first chord in the song. What is the scale degree of a D? Well, we're in the key of D, so on the D major scale, we have a 1. So the D is a 1 chord. Easy enough. Let's move on to the next chord, which is a G, and a G is a 4 chord. So we got a 4. On to the next one, B minor. Where's the B minor? Remember, it just says B here, but we have to follow it all the way to the bottom, which tells us that the B is the 6th chord, and the 6th chord is always a minor. So the B minor is a 6. A chord is the 5 chord right there. And so we'll write a 5. Now, you might see numbers like this, or sometimes people write them as Roman numerals as well. So let's just write Roman numerals as we continue on, and you can check. You'll still know whether it's a 1, 4, 5, 6 chord, but let's take a look and use Roman numerals. So we're back to the B minor. We already know that a B minor is the 6th chord right down here. So let's write that as a Roman numeral, which is VI. So that's a 6th chord. D, back to the 1, just an I. G is the 4. We already determined that from before. IV. B minor, we've done that a couple times now, is the 6th. And A is the 5, which is just a V. So you might see these either way. You might just see numbers 1, 4, 5, 6, or you might see Roman numerals as well. Just keep that in mind. But that is, in essence, the Nashville Number System. And so what I want you to do now is take a song that you have planned coming up this Sunday and work through this process. Figure out what key it's in. Figure out the scale of that key. If you don't know how to do that, just Google, okay, I'm in the key of D. What is the D scale? What are the notes in the D scale, or whatever key you're in? And then go ahead and write, okay, like back to this scale, D, E, F sharp, G, write the numbers down beneath your scale, and then write major, minor, minor, major, major, minor, diminished, major. And then go through the song, work through the chord chart, and do what we just did. And this process takes like 5 times to do before you really start to get the hang of one key, and then you don't even have to write it down anymore, and you can already know in your head, okay, in the key of G, a G chord is a 1 chord. In the key of C, the chord is a 4 chord, and so on. And you'll get this, but it takes a little bit of work, but it's so important. And this, just trust me for now. We're going to discover the benefits in next week's video because we're running out of time. But just trust me for now. This is the key to unlocking the next step in the musical part of your worship leading. This opens so many possibilities. We're going to look at those possibilities next week. Before you go, I just wanted to share with you a free audio training that I put together called 5 Tips to Instantly Improve Your Worship Leading. You can find it at leadingworshipwell.com. These are just super simple tips that if you're just aware of them and make the conscious effort to do them, you will improve your worship leading because of them. Hey, thanks so much for joining me today. Once again, my name is Spencer Carmody with leadingworshipwell.com. Make sure to follow me on Instagram or Facebook at leadingworshipwell because I'm posting new worship leading tips every single day. I can't wait to finish out this series with you. We got 2 more videos to go. Next week, we're going to talk about the actual benefits of using this system, but we had to know what it was before we understand the benefits and how to actually use it. So that's coming up next week. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on that. This is super important in unlocking the key to that next step of your musical worship leading. So don't miss it. Hit subscribe below. Maybe hit like on this video if it helped you out. Leave me a comment below. Let me know if this made sense. If you need any more information, I'll be happy to answer those questions. Thanks so much for joining me today. I'll catch you in the next one. Keep leading worship well. See ya.